The first light of dawn crept across Hawthorne Grange as if hesitant to reveal the truth it illuminated. A once grand estate fading at the edges, much like the hopes of the woman who now moved quietly through its dim corridors. Lady Eleanor Ashcombe adjusted the clasp of her traveling cloak with steady fingers, though her breath trembled in the cold air. She was not a timid woman, no one who knew her would accuse her of that, but resolve forged in silence still wavered when tested against decades of expectation. Today, however, she refused to bend. The decision that had haunted her for weeks had finally crystallized into action. She would run. Her father's study door stood open behind her, a faint glow of dying embers flickering within. The baronet had fallen asleep among his ledgers again, chasing one more hopeless calculation that might salvage their fortune. His increasingly desperate schemes had narrowed toward one final solution: marry off his eldest daughter. Not to a man of her choosing, nor even one of suitable temperament, but to the Earl of Dunridge, whose wealth outweighed the years etched into his lined face. He was courteous and unexpectedly gentle, yes, but to Eleanor he represented a gilded cage. She had spent her youth watching her sisters glide into marriages wrapped in finery, yet she had remained stubbornly herself, bookish, observant, and unwilling to barter her freedom for a title. Now she was being bargained anyway. She moved softly past portraits of ancestors whose eyes followed her with painted severity. They had known duty as a shield and obedience as a virtue. She wondered fleetingly whether any daughter among them had ever longed for more than survival. Even now she feared the consequences of her rebellion. A woman disappearing at dawn would spark talk that burned hotter than truth. Yet she told herself firmly that it was better to endure whispers than to live imprisoned. In that, at least, she had conviction. Her boots sank into the damp earth as she stepped behind the hedges bordering the courtyard. The mist clung to the air like breath held too long. She paused, listening for any stir from the servant's wing. Silence answered her. Only the distant cry of a waking bird broke the hush. She drew her cloak tighter and walked swiftly toward the wrought iron gate at the southern edge of the property. Beyond it lay the open road, and beyond that, the faint promise of a life not dictated by desperation. Yet as she approached, the fog shifted, revealing the outline of a horse and rider waiting motionless at the boundary. Her breath caught and she froze mid-stride. The figure dismounted with practiced grace, boots landing with the soft crunch of frost-kissed gravel. He stepped forward and the muted light found his features, sharply hewn, unmistakable. The Duke of Harland. Eleanor's heart beat painfully hard, not from fear but from the sheer impossibility of his presence. She had glimpsed him only fleetingly over the years at London gatherings, always surrounded by respectful distance, as though the air around him was too solemn to disturb. A war hero returned from the continent, a statesman of rare composure, and a man whose reserve discouraged gossip. Nothing about him belonged in the shadows of her family's decrepit estate at dawn. "Lady Eleanor," he said, voice low enough that the mist seemed to draw closer to listen. He removed his gloves slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. It was not a commanding stare, nor a pleading one, but something deeper, an earnestness that unsettled her far more than authority would have. "Your Grace," she managed, stepping back though she did not truly want to. "Why are you here? This is hardly an hour for, well, for anyone." He exhaled quietly, almost as if releasing a truth he had held too long. "I've come to prevent you from vanishing into uncertainty. Or at least to ensure you do not do so alone." Her pulse quickened, confusion warring with indignation. "You presume much. You do not know my intentions." "I know enough," he replied softly. "The arrangements with the Earl of Dunridge are no secret. Nor is the distress you have tried so admirably to conceal. And last night, when word reached me that a carriage had been ordered at dawn, I thought—" he hesitated, searching her face. "I could not let you make such a journey without protection." Eleanor's mind spun. He had received word? Someone had spoken? She felt exposed, as though her private rebellion had been dragged into the open. Yet beneath her rising panic lay something far more bewildering, the warmth simmering just beneath his carefully measured words. He stood mere feet from her, the fog curling around his shoulders like a cloak, but his eyes held none of the restraint he was known for. They held concern, genuine and disarming. "You owe me nothing," she whispered. "We barely know one another." His jaw tightened with a flicker of emotion she had never seen from him in crowded rooms where he wore composure like armor. "Perhaps that is my fault. Perhaps I observed too quietly, waited too long. But I could not ignore this." The admission struck her harder than any command might have. She had always assumed he looked past her at gatherings, more interested in discussions of Parliament than in overlooked daughters lingering at the edges. Yet here he was, breaking propriety at the earliest hour of morning because of her. She could not understand it, not fully, but she sensed sincerity in every restrained movement he made. Her grip on her cloak tightened. "If my father discovers, he will assume you made a difficult choice," the Duke answered, "and that I intercepted you to ensure no harm befell you. Nothing more." His gaze deepened. "Unless you wish there to be more." The world seemed to hold its breath with her. The fog wrapped them in a private sphere, isolating the moment from reason. She searched his expression, looking for the hidden motive her upbringing told her must exist. But there was nothing except patience and a quiet urgency he could not fully hide. "I don't know what I wish," she admitted. "Only that I cannot marry a man I do not love." "And you should not," he said gently. "But leaving without direction will only trade one danger for another. Come with me for now, no obligations, no promises. Simply a safer path until you decide your future." The words settled into her chest with startling clarity. He offered not ownership, not persuasion, but shelter. The choice remained hers. Eleanor took one slow breath, then another. She looked toward the house, toward the life she was running from, then back at the man who had stepped willingly into her chaos. Her decision did not come with sudden certainty, but it came with enough courage to move her feet. She stepped toward him. And the fog behind her closed like a curtain on the world she had left. The forest greeted them with a chill that deepened as they rode beneath its canopy, though Eleanor suspected the cold came more from uncertainty than from the morning air. The Duke guided his horse with measured calm, ensuring she kept pace beside him. His silence was not the silence of avoidance, but of consideration, as though each word he might speak carried a weight he was not yet ready to release. Eleanor found the restraint disconcerting. She had agreed to follow him, yet her mind spun with questions she dared not voice too quickly, lest she reveal her bewilderment too plainly. The lodge appeared as a modest silhouette at the edge of a clearing, a structure of stone and timber built for practicality rather than grandeur. It suited him. Nothing about the Duke of Harlan seemed wasteful, even his elegance felt earned rather than inherited. He dismounted first, offering his hand not with the entitlement of a man accustomed to obedience but with the courtesy of someone who believed assistance should be offered, not assumed. She hesitated only briefly before accepting. His hand was warm despite the cold, steady despite the tension she sensed beneath his controlled movements. Inside, the fire he lit cast a soft glow across the room's simple furnishings. Eleanor's gaze drifted to the scars lining his forearm as he set the kindling. She had heard whispers of battle, of nights spent in the mud outside Salamanca, of soldiers looking to him for leadership when retreat seemed inevitable. Yet he had never spoken of these experiences in society. Men in London liked to display their bravery. He seemed determined to bury his. For the first time she wondered what it had cost him. "You have questions," he said quietly, rising from the hearth and brushing ash from his hands. "Ask what you wish." She folded her cloak on the chair beside her, choosing her words with care. "Why intervene at all? You say you wish to ensure my safety, but that alone cannot explain why a duke jeopardizes his reputation for the sake of a woman he has scarcely spoken to." He did not bristle at her candor. Instead, he crossed the room slowly as though he needed the distance to steady himself before answering. "I have observed you longer than you know. Not because I intended to intrude upon your life, but because you possess a quiet resolve I found difficult to ignore." He paused, studying the flame. After the war, society seemed unbearably loud. Yet in every crowded ballroom, you held yourself with calm purpose, never performing, never simpering. You were simply yourself. It was a rare kind of dignity. His admission disarmed her more than any declaration of affection might have. She had never imagined she possessed qualities a man of his experience might notice. You watched, yet you never approached. I feared my intentions would be misconstrued, he answered. A soldier returns home changed. I did not trust myself to seek anything as delicate as companionship. And you? He looked at her directly. You deserved someone whole. Eleanor felt her breath catch. She had expected evasion, perhaps even polite excuses, but not this raw sincerity. The vulnerability in his statement unsettled her defenses. War may change a man, she said softly, but surviving it does not diminish him. A faint smile touched his mouth, gone as quickly as it appeared. You speak with more compassion than I deserve. Before she could reply, the distant echo of hoofbeats disrupted the stillness. Eleanor stiffened, instinctively moving toward the window. The Duke joined her, his expression shifting from contemplative to alert. Through the trees, two riders moved swiftly along the distant path, their silhouettes familiar in their rigid posture. My father, she whispered, recognizing the outline of the baronet's horse. The other rider, she suspected, was the Earl of Dunridge himself. Guilt and dread tangled inside her. She had not wished to create panic, nor intended for two men, one older and earnest, the other burdened by desperation, to chase her across the countryside. They will follow the road, the Duke said calmly. They have not seen us. And they will likely head first to the coaching inn in Ashwood, assuming you sought hired transport. We have time. But they will learn soon enough, she murmured. And when they do, they will think the worst. He nodded, though his expression remained resolute. Their assumptions are beyond our control. What matters is what you choose to do next. The simplicity of his statement contrasted sharply with the complexity of her situation. She had slipped away to reclaim her autonomy, yet here she stood, relying on a man whose presence reshaped every choice before her. She did not know whether she moved toward independence or deeper entanglement. He stepped closer, his voice quiet but firm. Eleanor, I will not make decisions for you. If you wish to return home, I will escort you. If you wish to leave England entirely, I will see you safely to the coast. And if you choose to remain here until you decide, I will ensure no harm reaches you. She studied him, searching for even the faintest trace of manipulation. There was none. Only sincerity and a steadiness that made her chest tighten with something dangerously close to trust. What do you want? She asked, the question emerging despite her resolve to remain composed. He did not retreat from it. I want you safe. And if fate is kind, if you allow it, I wish to be the man who earns your regard, not by circumstance but by merit. The fire crackled, punctuating his words with a warmth that spread through her far more perilously than the heat itself. She had spent her life unnoticed except when needed. To be seen, not as a pawn, not as an obligation, but as a person worthy of patience and respect, unsettled her deeply. She moved toward the hearth, needing distance from the intensity of his gaze. Yet even with her back partially turned, she felt the shift in the room, the quiet understanding forming between them, fragile yet undeniable. The situation remained precarious, but something in her had changed. She was no longer running blindly. She was choosing to think, to breathe, to weigh possibilities she had never permitted herself to imagine. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. I will stay. For now. Until I understand what it is I want. He inclined his head in acknowledgement, though relief flickered in his eyes before he masked it. Then you may remain here as long as you wish. You have my word. Outside, the hoofbeats faded into distance. Inside, the stillness grew warmer, richer, threaded with the unspoken promise that the choices ahead would reshape them both. And though she did not say it aloud, Eleanor felt it settle within her. She was no longer running from something. She was moving toward something yet undefined, and perhaps toward someone who had waited far longer than she ever realized. London received them with a kind of scrutiny that felt almost physical, as though every polished window and passing carriage carried eyes trained upon the pair who entered the city under circumstances ripe for speculation. Eleanor kept her chin lifted despite the relentless attention. She had known gossip would follow her the moment she stepped beyond Hawthorne Grange, but she had not anticipated the ferocity with which society seized upon her disappearance, and the Duke's involvement. Rumors circulated through drawing rooms and coffee houses alike, each tale more embellished than the last. Some claimed she had run away with a lover. Others insisted the Duke had stolen her from her father's estate in a fit of long-repressed passion. The truth, quiet and complicated, had no place in a world that thrived on spectacle. The Duke remained composed beside her, though the tightening of his jaw betrayed the strain beneath his otherwise impeccable restraint. He guided her through the grand entrance of Harland House, where the staff bowed with a mixture of loyalty and surprise. The butler's eyes lingered on Eleanor only briefly, yet she sensed the flicker of curiosity he dared not voice. Her presence here, in the home of one of England's most influential men, was a silent disruption to every rule she had ever lived by. In the drawing room, the Duke poured her tea with deliberate patience, but she felt the tremor running beneath the calm surface of their interactions. "The papers have already printed your father's distress," he said finally. "And speculation about my involvement is substantial." He set the teapot down with unusual heaviness. "Parliament meets tomorrow. Half the chamber will be more interested in my conduct than in foreign policy." She folded her hands, grounding herself. "I never intended for you to bear the consequences of my choices." He met her gaze with unwavering steadiness. "I chose to ride to you. I chose to bring you here. These consequences are not yours alone." The admission landed with a weight she struggled to hold. She had spent her life trying to avoid burdening others, yet here was a man who accepted responsibility not as martyrdom but as partnership. It frightened her in a way that felt almost like hope. Before she could reply, the butler returned with a hesitant bow. "Your Grace, Lord Dunridge has arrived unexpectedly." His eyes flicked to Eleanor. "He requests an audience at once." Her stomach tightened. The Earl of Dunridge entered moments later, his cane tapping lightly on the marble floor. Though age had softened his posture, his expression remained warm, even sorrowful. "Lady Eleanor," he greeted her, voice steady with concern rather than accusation. "Your father has been beside himself. I feared the worst." Eleanor stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. "I never wished to cause you grief. You have shown nothing but kindness and she faltered, knowing that any attempt to soften the truth would only prolong the inevitable. "I cannot marry you." The Earl absorbed the words with the dignity she had expected of him. He nodded slowly. "I suspected as much when I learned you had vanished before dawn. But I came not to plead for your hand, my dear. I came to shield your reputation. Society is unforgiving to women who act on desperation." The Duke stepped forward, his expression tense. "I will not allow her to be harmed by gossip." The Earl offered a faint smile. "Then you understand the gravity of the situation, Harland. Without a swift resolution, her name will be dragged through every salon for months. If she wished it, I would still marry her, not out of pride but to give her protection." Eleanor felt the sincerity of the offer, and it stung with a bittersweet tenderness. This man whom she did not love, was offering himself as a shield from scandal. But marrying him would restore a life she had already stepped away from. She looked between the two men, one gentle and yielding, the other stoic yet quietly tormented, and felt the tremor of a choice that could not be undone. "I am grateful," she said softly, "but I will not accept a life built on rescue. I wish for a life of my own choosing." The Earl studied her for a long moment, then bowed his head in acceptance. "Then may your chosen path bring you happiness." He turned to the Duke. "And may you guide her through the fire that will follow. She deserves nothing less." After the Earl departed, the silence between Eleanor and the Duke deepened into something fraught. He stood at the window watching carriage wheels carve lines through the damp street below. His shoulders, usually held with military precision, seemed weighed down by invisible armor. "You will face consequences for this," she murmured. "Your position. Your influence. Your name." He turned, and for the first time since she had known him, she saw vulnerability unmasked. Influence can be rebuilt. Reputations mended. "But let me be clear, Eleanor, I would rather stand alone before the entire realm than allow you to bear disgrace." The force of the sentiment struck her like a physical blow. She stepped toward him before caution could tether her. "Why?" she asked, voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Why give so much for a woman who was never meant to matter to anyone of your standing?" He exhaled slowly as though he had been holding the truth for years. "Because you mattered to me long before you knew my name. Because everything I admired in you, your quiet strength, your refusal to perform for society, your loyalty to those who never deserved it, made me a better man simply by observing you. And because I cannot bear the thought of your future being dictated by fear or obligation." Her breath trembled. She had long believed herself too ordinary, too overlooked to inspire devotion. Yet here he stood, a man revered by England, offering not possession but reverence. Before she could respond, the butler's voice echoed through the corridor, announcing the arrival of several carriages. The Duke stiffened. "It has begun," he said grimly. "Half the ton has come to witness our downfall, or our declaration." He offered her his arm. "If you will stand with me, Eleanor, we will face them together." She placed her hand upon his sleeve, feeling the strength beneath it, not the strength of title but of character. The doors to the grand ballroom opened, revealing a crowd that fell instantly silent. Every eye turned toward them, ravenous for scandal. The Duke stepped forward, then did something no one there had imagined possible. He knelt. Not in shame, but with a reverence that rippled through the room like a shockwave. Gasps rose, fans fluttered, whispers halted mid-breath. "Lady Eleanor Ashcombe," he said, voice carrying with unshakable clarity, "I ask not for redemption nor for advantage, but for the honor of standing beside you, if you will have me." Time slowed. The world seemed to hinge on the space between one heartbeat and the next. Eleanor felt her past, her fears, her doubts, all the fragile defenses she had carried, melt beneath the truth of what he offered. Not rescue. Not obligation. Just. She stepped toward him, the room holding its breath as she extended her hand. And as he rose to meet her, the world outside their moment dissolved into irrelevance, leaving only the beginning of a future neither had dared to imagine.